My name is Jemmy, and I'm 16 years old. My story begins 2 years ago when my parents and I migrated from our country to find a better life in the U.S. We were very poor. We had no means of comfortable survival and no hope for a change. So we decided to change our circumstances instead. There was no way we could afford the cost and bear with the long process of legal means of living in the United States. So we did what others had done. We became illegal immigrants. Oh, don't be so shocked. We're not bad people. I know it's wrong. I mean, it's called illegal for a reason. I am aware that it's not what we should have done, but this was crucial in our case. We didn't know what else to do. It was either this or stay home and die of starvation. We chose the better option, and for a while, it all worked. We lived simple lives. Mama and I worked as maids. Papa, on the other hand, took whatever job he could get. We knew how dangerous it was to get exposed and did everything to blend in. We were managing like that until one day we heard on the TV some news that later became our worst nightmare. The government was taking new and extreme measures to deport illegal immigrants. This put our entire lives in jeopardy. The daily deportations were increasing rapidly. Hundreds of illegal immigrants were being found. We couldn't risk getting caught because there was nothing, absolutely nothing, waiting for us back home. My parents panicked, not knowing what to do. We'd been hiding for long as illegal immigrants, and we knew that we'd most likely get deported. In the rush of things, an idea popped into my head that I knew could save the whole situation. The thing is, it was too extreme. I thought about it a lot, and eventually, I decided to do it. In one of the houses where I worked, I met a boy who I ended up falling in love with. He was the son of the household, rich, handsome, and somehow we dated. Of course, it was a strange relationship we always had to hide. We'd never let our parents know of this. They would only worry. Now, when this problem of deportation arose, I knew Josh, my boyfriend, was the only person who could help me. He was American and from a wealthy and powerful family. I knew he loved me, and I thought of him at most times as my future partner. So, maybe, if things got more official between us, the chances of us staying in the U.S. would rise. Now, I'm not talking about marriage. I wish that would work. Well, I could ask him to marry me, but I wasn't sure if that would be legal at my age, and his parents would definitely not approve. It was going to be a long, long story. So instead, I came up with an idea that was more doable. I wanted to get pregnant. Surely Josh would stay by my side. He wouldn't let me do this alone. And if that was the case, he'd make sure no one would take away his beloved girlfriend and baby. Even his parents would accept us when a baby is involved. My plan seemed just perfect. Getting pregnant was the easy part. I read online all about it, and I followed the instructions. I waited for the right time of the month, and I got with Josh. Of course, he thought I was on the pill because I answered with yes every time he asked. It didn't work the first time, so I kept trying. Until one day, the pregnancy test showed positive for pregnancy. Even though things were working according to my plan, when I saw the results, I froze in my place. Was I really pregnant? Seeing the results in my own eyes made everything feel so real. Days after, I went to Josh and told him about the pregnancy. His cold reaction was very confusing and humiliating for me. As if he couldn't understand my words, he said, "What did you say?" I repeated my words and showed him the pregnancy test. Truthfully, I expected Josh to smile widely and say, "Oh my God." But no, at that moment and right before my eyes, his face became like a mask of anger. He blamed me for not using protection properly and said I should not even think of telling anyone anything, and even if I did, he would deny it anyway. Our relationship had always been in secret, so no one would bear witness. I cried, begging him, but he didn't listen. The next day, I was fired. So there I was, one pregnant, jobless, illegal immigrant. I realized that instead of solving our problems, I had made it even worse. I had no choice now. I had to tell my parents. I imagined how they would react. Mama was a Christian. Dad was a peaceful man. Still, as his daughter, I knew he would be a scary disciplinarian when the situation arose. But I had to tell them anyway. Papa and Mama sat in the living room, tired as they looked at me. I saw how much strain they were under, and my heart broke all over again. The stress and worry of deportation were killing them, and I knew I was about to make it all worse. When I finally told them the truth, they were indeed shocked. Mama looked at Papa. They both looked at me. There was an uncomfortable silence as I waited for their reaction. When the silence became too much, I began to shakily explain that the reason I even considered getting pregnant at first was that I wanted to help. I cried and asked them to forgive me. I told them that the plan backfired and my boyfriend didn't want to help. My mother wrapped her arms around my shoulder while crying, and Papa put his hand on my knee, a tear running down his cheeks. Seriously, I was confused. What was going on? My papa crying instead of giving me the talk of my life? They were silent for a little while, but then I asked them what I was going to do with the baby. Papa said I should keep it, that it might even be better that way. What? How could they say that? It was true that I got pregnant to help them, but it was obvious that I did a horrible mistake. I sacrificed my whole life ahead of me, even though I had practically volunteered. How could they think of sacrificing me easily like that? Days went by, and I couldn't speak to them. I felt betrayed by my own parents. How could they tell me to keep the baby and destroy my life? How could they not worry after they heard all I'd been through? So I went ahead and told my mom that I've decided to get an abortion, whether she wants to help me through it or not. My mom seemed upset with my decision, but she didn't argue and assured me that she'll help. The next day, she assisted me with setting an appointment at the clinic, and it felt like a weight was lifted off my shoulders. Regardless of that, my connection with my parents didn't improve, and they only seemed to be feeling sadder with each passing day. A day prior to my appointment, I woke up to find the house empty. I called my parents, but no one answered. It was strange because it wasn't like them to just leave and not say anything. I also tried to call them, but they didn't answer. I started to worry, but I didn't give it much thought. However, when a few hours passed by and they still were absent, I started to seriously worry. Could they be troubled with the police or get held by the authorities? All kinds of thoughts were racing through my mind, and I was panicking. I went to my parents' room trying to find anything that could give me a clue as to what was going on. And boom, here it was, a letter on my mom's desk that said, "Notice to appear" on it. I didn't understand what it meant exactly, so I started reading. The letter was from the government. It was an order for us to appear at court to review our resident status. My heart dropped. Even though we were expecting this, it never really hit me until I saw that letter. I looked at the date set for court, and it was for today. I freaked out. I had no idea what to do. My parents were probably getting an order of deportation at the moment. I had to act fast. Without thinking, I headed out to Josh's place. He was the only person who could help me. When Josh saw me, he was confused. He asked what's wrong. As I was trying to explain to him what had happened, I almost fainted. Josh held me and said that I should relax and tell him what happened. When I did, Josh quickly called his father and asked him what should be done. After several phone calls, Josh said that everything will be taken care of, and together, we headed to court. It was crazy how much power Josh's family had, because when I got there, my parents' trial was delayed for some hours, and they were sitting in the discussion room with a fancy lawyer. When I got there, the lawyer asked me if I was planning to continue with my pregnancy. I looked at my parents, and I didn't know how to answer that. The lawyer continued to explain that if my answer was yes, it would help his case very much, and we most likely won't get deported. And if not? I asked. The lawyer answered quietly, then the chances of staying here won't be that high. My mom lowered her head, then told me that they apologized if I felt pressured about the baby, and told me that they didn't tell me about the notice because they didn't want this to affect the decision I make about my pregnancy. My dad then said that they would never think of sacrificing their own daughter. Seeing him crying was unexpected. He said that there are some things that I don't know about. Problems with dangerous family members were only one of the reasons we had to change locations. If we were to go back to our home country, we could be in real danger. It had been pretty ugly, and they tried to shield me from it all. I was surprised to hear that going back to our country was going to be life-threatening. Dealing with all of this was really hard and complicated. But the reality was that I had a baby on the way, and it could be the only reason to keep us going. I want to keep the baby, I said. My mom had tears in her eyes. Are you sure? Yes. I was sure more than anything that I never want to see my family in danger. I never thought it was possible, but now, 8 months later, I am at peace. Even though Josh didn't want to be a part of the baby's life, I did really well with the help of my parents. The baby girl is already knocking and would be out anytime soon. For the life of me, I can't even believe I once tried to abort this sweet angel. Yes, that's her name, Angel. And she is a constant source of joy to me. My parents were never deported and were granted residence because I was carrying an American child. And I also was underage. So my parents were given permission to stay with me, thanks to Josh's parents' lawyer. I don't know what the future holds and what we will do, but we're trying our best to keep going as a solid family. This was a terrible experience, but still, I am thankful for it. It is the reason I have my angel.
Hello, my name is Becca. Even though I'm still young, I went through something horrible most people never go through. I was jailed. I was sent away to a juvenile detention center. Now, I'm not trying to make excuses for the things that I have done, but I want to share the traumatic experience I had at such a young age. Let's just say that no teenager should ever have to go through that. My story started when I began taking driving lessons. I was really enjoying my lessons and was always excited for the next lesson to come. My boyfriend Dan was already driving, and he had a really fancy car that his parents had bought him as a gift. Dan was really nice. He drove me to every place you could think of in that car, and I always envied him for having a driving license, unlike me. Only if I knew that my love for that car was going to change my reality. One night, Dan and I were in his car around the neighborhood. I was telling him how much I was fascinated by his car. Dan then offered to let me drive it, but I laughed and said that I wish. But Dan was serious. He said that there was no one around, and just a drive around the block would do no harm. I refused at first, but Dan kept pushing me to do it, so I eventually agreed. And it was awesome. The car ran so smoothly, and I drove around the block like a pro. But it didn't stop there. I wanted more. I took us to another neighborhood, and I was having so much fun. I turned on the music to full volume and smiled and went a bit faster. I took a look at Dan. He was such a wonderful boyfriend, I thought. He looked back at me and smiled. When suddenly we heard a loud sound and I stopped the car immediately. Oh my God, I thought. I hit something. Dan and I got out quickly. We saw a man lying on the floor. He looked dead. Oh my God, what have I done? I was panicking. I can't even remember much of that night, but I remember that I hurried back into the car with Dan and drove off without thinking. Hours after, police officers were knocking at my door, and that was the night my life went downhill. Even though the man I hit didn't die, I was charged with driving without a license and a hit-and-run attempt. At that point, I had lost all contact with Dan. A couple of months after my 16th birthday, I was sentenced to a year in juvie. It felt like everything was spiraling out of control. I remember them putting me into a bus with a bunch of girls, some older than me, some much younger. It all seemed surreal to me as I stared out of the window. When I first entered the building, I noticed the number of guards standing around. It was unnerving to see them standing with a look on their face like they dared you to step out of line. The line I was in inched closer and closer towards the front until my name was called. I always hated going to the doctor, but this situation was different. They sat me down in a chair and asked question after question, each one more personal than the last. This was done while sitting next to a wide open door, a guard right outside, the line for the next girl not too far away, and other inmates and staff members walking past. To say that I felt exposed was an understatement. All the details of my life were aired out in front of strangers. After the seemingly unending questions, I was given a full examination. I thought the full-body pat-down by the man at the front was bad, but this was more touch, twist, and pull than I was comfortable with. The woman conducting the exam would keep saying, "Hold still," even though she was the one moving me, twisting my body into even more awkward positions, which would cause me to lose my balance. This earned me another stern look and a hard grasp of the shoulders. I was so happy when it was done, thinking that it couldn't get any worse. Then I met my roommate. She was a tall girl who must have been my age or a year older. When I entered, she gave me a look filled with caution and anger. The guard left, and she started to speak. She pointed her finger around the room. "This is my space, and it's been my space for years." Then she pointed to a small corner near the bed. "You can settle for that space over there." Her voice was absolute. She didn't wait for me to answer as she turned her back. I didn't want to cause trouble, so I sat there thinking about what I had gotten myself into and how the time would pass in this miserable place. The time I spent outside of my room was a nightmare. I was always the quiet type. I would rather spend my time alone than in a group. I wish I would have known that in juvie, it was the same as painting a target on your back. I got teased a lot. My things were thrown onto the floor, I was pushed from behind and tripped, punched, and even kicked. The treatment wasn't anything I wasn't used to, so I endured for a while until I had enough. I fought back and immediately got in trouble. The guards didn't help the inmates. Apparently that wasn't their job. Most of the time, they would turn a blind eye until it escalated from a scuffle to a full-out brawl. They seemed to follow a motto: if we don't need to be involved, we won't. If we do need to get involved, you better hope you're not the reason. That's why most fights got resolved between the inmates. When the guards came to pull us apart, they pushed and pulled, then hit us until we complied. It felt worse than the actual fight.